It is wonderful to have so many of you join us today. Today's lecture will be an opportunity to learn with one of our excellent and longtime teachers, Gideon Amir, who will be exploring the concept of chosenness. The notion of a chosen people is a complex subject in our tradition, both historically and in our contemporary society. The language of chosenness was even removed from the liturgy of the Reconstructionist movement following the teachings of Mordecai Kaplan, one of the most prominent Jewish leaders of the 20th century. I look forward to exploring with Gideon the textual origins and interpretations of chosenness that continue as they continue to have relevance today. Thank you to Raymond Scalatar for sponsoring this lecture. He dedicates this talk in the memory of Rabbis Norman Gerstenfeld, Joshua O. Haberman, and Joseph P. Weinberg of the Washington Hebrew Congregation, in appreciation for their positive impact on his family. Before I introduce Gideon, I want to highlight our next program. On August 6th, Rabbi Lauren Touchman will delve into the significance of Tisha B'Av, a day of mourning and introspection commemorating the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem and other tragedies throughout Jewish history. The lessons and teachings of Tisha B'Av are especially important and have enduring relevance at this time in our post-October 7th reality. See our website for more information. Now to today's program. As usual, ask questions using the Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Please be as concise as possible and use complete sentences. Questions will be discussed at the end of the lecture, but feel free to write them in at any time during the presentation. Gideon Amir was born in Holland to Holocaust survivors who moved to Israel in 1947. He grew up in Jerusalem and served in the IDF as a paratrooper. Gideon received his bachelor's degree in mathematics from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a master's degree in computer science from the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot. In 1980, he moved to the United States, where he worked as a manager in several companies, including British Telecom and Cisco. In 1999, he pursued his interest in Jewish studies and enrolled in a full-time graduate program at Baltimore Hebrew University, where in May 2001, he received his master's degree. Redirecting his passion for teaching from computer science to Jewish and biblical studies, he became an adult Jewish educator for several education programs, including the Haberman Institute, where he has taught for many years. Earlier this year, Gideon published a book titled Fresh Insights on Biblical Texts. Ezra Greenspan, Kahn Chair in Humanities at Southern Methodist University, wrote that Gideon's insights are not just predictable, but eye-opening. I haven't had a chance to read his book yet, but I look forward to doing so. I have it here on my desk to take a look at soon. So we'll put a link in the chat for those of you who might be interested in purchasing it. And so with that, I welcome Gideon to our screen for a fresh exploration of the concept of chosenness. Welcome, Gideon.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for the nice introduction. And good afternoon to everyone here. It's kind of strange that I'm talking to a lot of people but cannot see any one of you. But maybe it's actually safer because the topic that we are going to talk about is very controversial and can lead to high emotions. So maybe it is a bit safer that I cannot see you in this particular case. So the concept of Jewish chosenness, yes, it raises issues of elitism, racism, arrogance, superiority, and all sorts of other problematic issues. So we have to look at it a little bit, how it developed, and how we can deal with this kind of question and how it is being dealt throughout the generations. Of course, we are going to start with the Bible, and I have to share my screen so you can see the text that I will read. Share. Okay, so here is, okay, so that's the title, and here we are going to the text itself. I will try to remember to scroll whenever we read, So you have all the text that I'm going to quote, you will also have on the screen and you can see. So in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, chapters 1 to 11, God is really concerned with the whole of humanity. Yes, with all human beings. And therefore, also when God gives consequence for misbehavior of humanity, he gives it to all of human beings. We have two cases like this. One of them is the flood story, and then later on is the story of the Tower of Babel. After the flood, when the flood was over, God gave instructions to Noah and to his descendants. Yes, that means to all human beings. And he gave the following instructions. This is Genesis chapter 9, verses 3 to 6. Every creature that lives shall be used to eat, as with the green grasses, I give you all these. You must not, however, eat flesh with its life, blood in it. But for your own lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. I will require it of every beast of humankind too. I will require a reckoning for human life of everyone for each other. Whoever sheds human blood, by human hands shall that one's blood be shed. For in the image of God was humankind made. So God gives two sets of instructions to all humanity. One in verses 3 and 4, there is a permission to consume flesh, but there is a prohibition to consume blood. And verses 5 and 6 stresses the idea that murder is prohibited and that human beings need to create some sort of judicial system that will allow them to prosecute and execute murderers. Yes, the responsibility of taking care of murderers is passed to us human beings. So these are the only two instructions that are being given as instructions by God to all of humanity. Yes, it is true that later on the rabbis built on this and created seven instruction of seven sets of seven instructions, which was called the seven Noahide commandments. Yes, that are an obligation of every human being, including the Gentiles, not only the Israelites. But the rabbis did not establish a consequence, what happens if you don't follow these instructions, although some rabbis at least say, well, Gentiles who do not follow the seven Noahide commandments, they will not enjoy the afterlife. So there is no consequence during lifetime, but maybe there is a consequence once we die. However, starting with chapter 12 in the book of Genesis, God decides to try a new experiment by establishing a special relationship with one person and with his descendants. So, of course, that person is Abraham. And the rest of the Bible is really the story of this experiment, the story of the relationship between God and Abraham and his descendants. So in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, we read, yes, and the Lord said to Avram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. You will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So notice at this point, nothing is said about exclusiveness. That means Abraham does not have any reason to think that God is making something special with him or only with him. Yes, there maybe God has made the same kind of deals with other people to go to someplace else and so forth, and he will make them a blessing and so forth. There is no exclusiveness. Later on, we see the exclusiveness of the chosen of Abraham expressed in many places. For example, when God changes his name from Avram to Avraham, that is in Genesis chapter 17, verses 5 to 8. And you shall be no longer called Avram, but your name shall be Avraham. For I make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come. I assign the land to you, the land you sojourn in, to you and your offspring to come, and all the land of Canaan as an everlasting holding. I will be their God. Okay? So this time the promise is added. The promise to Abraham includes also the land of Canaan, yes, and the fact that it will be an everlasting covenant, everlasting promise that God is making, making to Abraham and his descendants. There is not yet a complete sense of exclusivity. That same promise repeats itself later on. We will not read every one of the places. It repeats itself to Abraham several times, and then also later to Isaac, and the same promise is repeated also to Jacob. By the time we come to the book of Exodus, we come already to the idea of exclusiveness. That means God is making a special covenant that applies only to Abraham's descendants, if you want. So one of the places that it is clear is in Exodus chapter 19, verses 5 to 6. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession from all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. But you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. This is God speaking to Moses. So the Hebrew in verse 5 clearly implies exclusiveness. Yes, you will be the special nation from all the nations, from all the other nations in the world. Yes, and Israel is required to follow God's instructions. Yes, and that gives them a potential to elevate themselves to a kingdom of priests. Yes, to a holy nation. Yes. And we have to remember that the word holy is never exactly explained in the Bible, kadosh, kedusha, but it really means sort of separate. Yes, separate. Yes, Shabbat is holy, Shabbat is separated from the rest of the days of the week and so forth. So the Israelites have the potential to elevate themselves to become holy, to become separate from all other nations. Okay? Later on, we see even more strong statements about the exclusiveness of the Israelites in their relationship with God. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 20. But you, Israel, the Lord took and brought out of Egypt that iron blast of furnace to be his very own people of inheritance, as now is the case. And then we continue in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 6 and 8 to 8. For you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God. Of all the people on earth, the Lord your God chose you to be God's treasured people. It is not because you are the most numerous of people that the Lord set his heart on you and chose you, Indeed, you are the smallest people. But it was because the Lord favored you and kept the oath he made to your fathers that the Lord freed you you with a mighty hand and rescued you from the house of bondage, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Okay, so you see more and more statements that say, yes, that the Israelites are a unique situation. They are the special people, and they are the only special that God chose. Okay, and you see even more Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For you are people consecrated to the Lord your God. The Lord your God chose you from all other people on earth to be his treasured people. Okay? Now, I could continue and bring you verse after verse after verse from all sorts of different places, in the Bible. So, but I will just read few more, and then we will move to some other places, because otherwise we can spend all the time just reading verses from the Bible. So in of course, the relationship between God and Israel is reciprocal. Yes, God requires a certain behavior from Israel, and God is their Lord, and the relationship is two-sided. This is two-sided covenant and not one-sided covenant, as we see in the book of Genesis. So Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 17 to 19. You have affirmed this day that the Lord is your God, that you will walk in his ways, and you will observe his laws and commandments and rules, and that you will obey him. And the Lord has affirmed this day that you are, as he promised you, his treasured people, who shall observe all his commandments, and that he will set you in fame and renown and glory, high above all the nations that he has made, and that you shall be, as he promised, a holy people to the Lord your God. Okay? So we continue. All throughout the Bible, you can find verses like this that suggest the unique relationship between God. God chose Abraham and his descendants to have this special relationship and to give them the potential to elevate themselves to become a kingdom of priests. Now, that of course somehow contradicts the idea that God is a sort of a universal God, and people who try to find statements in the Bible that suggest that God is a universal God usually go to Amos, to the prophet Amos, chapter 9, verse 7, when Amos says the following. To me, O Israelites, you are just like the Cushites, declared the Lord. True, I brought Israel up from the land of Egypt, but also the Philistines from Kaftor and the Arameans from Kir. So Amos is basically saying, you are not something special. God did that to other nations. But we have to realize, first of all, this is one of the few unique verses that suggest such an idea. And second, the same prophet Amos, in chapter 3, verse 2, he says something completely different. He says, you alone have I singled out of all the families of the earth. That is why I will call you to account for all your iniquities. Okay, so we must realize the Bible expresses all sorts of different ideas. If you want, you can almost find for every idea that you will say a verse that will support it and a verse that maybe does not support it. But if we want to talk about what is a biblical view of something, we have to look at throughout the Bible to what emerges out of it. So the fact that Amos made such a statement, as we read before, as we read before in chapter 9, that does not make it all of a sudden the opinion of the Bible, because the opinion of the Bible, as I demonstrated to you with many, many verses, and I just took probably 10% of all of them that exist, suggests exactly the opposite, that God chose Israel as a unique nation with whom he has this kind of relationship. And they are the people that God chose. Yes, they are the chosen people. So that is quite clear, in my opinion, as the opinion of the Bible. And that opinion, of course, found its way also to Jewish tradition later on. Yes, when we do a kiddush over the wine, yes, what we say, for example, in the kiddush, for you have chosen us and sanctified us from among all the nations. That is something that we do say today when we do the kiddush, or before we do the Torah reading in the synagogue. Yes, we are making the statement, praised are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us out of all the nations and bestowed upon us his Torah. Yes, who has chosen us out of all the nations. That is something that is in modern Jewish liturgy. Yes, as Matt mentioned, it may be that the reconstructionist removed all implications of chosenness out of there, but the majority of Jewish prayer books, you will still find these kind of statements in them. And during the Havdalah, the ceremony that ends the Shabbat and declares that the week, that the regular week had started, we have a section called Hamavdil, yes, and that is taken from the Babylonian Talmud, from tractate Psachim. The one who differentiated, this is, yes, God, the one who differentiates between sacred and profane, between light and dark, between Israel and the nations, between the seventh day and the 6 days of act. These are the 6 days of creation. That means Israel is compared here to the Shabbat. Israel is holy compared to the Shabbat, and the rest of the nations are compared to the regular days of the week. Yes? So the same idea that Israel is elevated and is unique in its relationship with God and its place in the world. And we see even a stronger statement like that. This is the original text of the Aleinu prayer, the prayer in which we end every service in our days now. To be honest, this particular section has been taken out during the Middle Ages because of Christian censorship. But in many Siddurim, especially Orthodox Siddurim and Sephardic Siddurim, you still find this text is being said. Yes? It is our obligation to praise the Master of all, to sacrifice, to ascribe greatness to the Creator of the world in the beginning, that he has not made us like the nations of the land, and has not positioned us like the families of the earth, that he has not assigned our portion like theirs, nor our lot like that of all their multitudes. For they prostrate themselves to vanity and nothingness, and pray to a God that cannot deliver. A very, very strong statement. Yes, a very, very strong statement that is made during at the end of every service. as I said, part of it has been taken out in modern prayer books as a result of the fact that it was taken out by the church when the church was in control, but was never re-entered. But you still find it in many, many Sidurim. Yes, he has not made us like the nations. He has not assigned our portion like theirs. They are worshiping nothing, only we worship the real God. Okay. Before I get out of the Bible, I do want to concentrate a little bit more, just a second, on the related issue that I already sort of hinted to, and that's the question: is God only the God of Israel, or is God the universal God, God of all humanity? And of course, God is universal from the point of view that God is the creator of the world, and God is a universal God from the point of view that God is in control of nature. Yes, so from the natural point of view, God is clearly a universal God, and he controls everything that is in the universe. But if you read carefully the Bible, you realize that once God established a special relationship with Abraham and his descendants, God is concentrating his attention, and he cares only about how Abraham and his descendants behave. God does not care about the other nations, about other people. The only time that he cares about how other people behave is when their behavior is related to the Israelites. Moreover, God is using other nations as a tool in his relationship with the Israelites. So, for example, for reasons that are never explained, God needed the Israelites to be slaves for hundreds of years. So he allowed the Egyptians to enslave the Israelites. Yes, to enslave the Israelites and to oppress them. But when the time came that that God wanted the Israelites to leave Egypt, God struck the Egyptians, although they were the tool that he used that he used as a tool for what he wanted to happen to the Israelites. Now that they finished to do whatever they needed, they can be spared. That anything can happen to them. He brings the 10 plagues upon them, and then he drowns all the soldiers of the Egyptians. Yes, the fate of the Egyptians is not important. What is important is what is happening to the Israelites. We see that much more even later on in the history books, in particularly in the book of Judges, where we have this cycle that the Israelites keep the covenant for quite a while with God, and then they go astray by starting to worship other gods. Once they do that, God becomes very angry, and he allows another nation, the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Amalekites, whoever it is, to oppress the Israelites. Eventually, the Israelites repent and ask God for forgiveness. And God, in his mercy, and I use the term mercy, I have to say mercy towards Israel, mercy towards his people. God is willing to accept their repentance, and therefore he allows the Israelites now to beat these people that God first allowed them to beat the Israelites when it was needed for his own reasons. So as you can see, the other nations are not of interest to God as far as what happened to them under normal circumstances. We don't read about things that happen in Egypt, while we read in the book of Kings about stories about what is happening in Canaan. We only read about Egypt when it has to do something with the history connected to Israel, or what happened in Persia, or what happened in other places. There, God is not participating in history. There, things happen because they happen, and so forth. And therefore, the image that you get out of this, out of the Bible, is clearly that God is the God of Israel. God is not a universal God. There is no relationship between God and anyone else except for the Israelites. Yes? And the only place where you can talk about God as a universal God is when you talk about nature. Yes, nature is under the control of God also, but not as far as his relationship with other people. As far as people are concerned, God is a God of Israel. Okay. One more point to make before we go back to the text, and that is another thing that people usually don't notice. But if you read carefully, especially the book of Deuteronomy, you realize that there is one very important issue about the covenant between God and Israel. And that is that the contract between Israel and God does not provide a way out. Yes, one cannot say at some point, yes, I was born an Israelite, but I'm not interested in having relationship with God. Therefore, I want to be out of the contract. There is no way out. If you are an Israelite and you do not follow the covenant, go to the chapters in Deuteronomy about the curses, and you will see what kind of terrible things may happen to you. Yes, and that, of course, led eventually to the Midrash that at Sinai, when the Israelites accepted the covenant and they said, yes, we will follow whatever God says, that not only all the Israelites stood at Sinai, but all the souls of all the future Israelites, eventually we are being shown, we are not called Israelites, we're called Jews, yes, all the souls of the Jews for whole future, all the souls, the future souls, were also at Sinai and accepted the covenant, and therefore we are all obligated to follow that covenant. Yes, that is of course a bit problematic. Yes, what happens if one is not interested in maintaining the covenant, in maintaining the relationship with God? That is actually something that the Bible does not accept as a possibility. Yes, of course, in biblical time, you don't find the idea of atheism. You don't find the idea that it's possible that there is no God at all. Something like this, nobody expresses an idea of that nature in biblical time. So everybody worshipped God or gods, yes, but there is nobody who did not worship anything. In today, it is a little bit more difficult, because if you are born to a Jewish mother and you are considered Jewish as a result of that, you can decide that you don't believe in any God, and that does not change the fact that you are considered Jewish, unless you go and actually switch to another religion. But if you're not, you can be a total atheist, and you are still considered a Jew, and therefore part of the covenant, whether you want or you don't want. Yes, so that is the situation that we have today. Okay. I want to bring one more quote from the book of Ezra, because this is really very, very important that affected a later view on this whole issue. And that is in Ezra chapter 9, verse 2, when Ezra is mentioning to the people, when he's reading them the whole Torah. Yes, he brought the Torah with him for Babylon, and he's reading to the people in Jerusalem the Torah. And he's mentioning them that one of their sins was that they intermarriage, that they married non-Israelites as wives. And here's what it says. Ezra 9 verse 2, they have taken the daughters as wives for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed has become intermingled with the peoples of the land. Okay? So here is a strong affirmation of that the descendants of Abraham have something genetically that is different from others. They are the holy seed, yes, and that should not be mixed up with the unholy seed of other nations. Yes, that, of course, the term genetic, I'm using the term genetic in modernity, we can use it. Of course, the Bible does not talk about genetics, but it's basically the same idea. The idea is that there is something genetically or physically different among the Israelites that does not apply to the rest of the nations. Okay? And that idea consistently continued throughout the generations. So, for example, around the year 200 BCE, we have the Apocrypha book, one of the books that was written called the Book of Jubilees. And in the Book of Jubilees, we have some repetition of the instructions that are being given to the Israelites during the Exodus. And in the Book of Jubilees, we find the following: Jubilees chapter 30, verses 11 to 13. And if there is any man who wishes in Israel to give his daughter to his sister, or his sister, to any man who is of the seed of the Gentiles, he shall surely die, and they shall stone him with stones, for he has wrought shame in Israel. And they shall burn the woman with fire, because she has dishonored the name of the house of her father, and she shall be rooted out of Israel. And let not an adulteress and no uncleanness be found in Israel throughout all the days of the generations of the earth, for Israel is holy unto the Lord. Yes? Any man who is of the seed of the Gentiles, this is not good. Yes, it's not like the holy seed, it's the seed of the Gentiles, and that should not mix. That should not be mixed. So that idea that there is something genetically, as I said it in modern term, or that there is something biologically different among the Jews, that idea is something that was promoted, and I will talk about it more a little bit later, further. But this is an idea that continues to plague us throughout history. Of course, some rabbis found it a little bit difficult, and they tried somehow to talk about God as a universal God and not to tone down this whole idea. So, for example, in the Mishnah, in the Sanhedrin 4:5, we find humanity was produced for one man, Adam, to show God's greatness. When a man mints a coin in a press, each coin is identical, but the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, creates people in the form of Adam, not one is similar to any other. So all of humanity is in the image of God. All of them are created in the image, in the form of Adam, of the first man. but they are not similar to one another. There is no distinction here between Israel and the rest of the rest. Yes? And the Tosefta Sanhedrin 105a says, for example, righteous people of all nations have a share in the world to come. As I mentioned before, yes, the rabbis agreed that they are also good people and righteous people among the Gentiles, and therefore they need to have some reward for their being righteous and so forth. So the reward is not something that is happening to them during their lifetime, but they have a share in the world to come. That means they will enjoy the afterlife. They will enjoy whatever way we understand the afterlife, what happened after we die. Okay. So on the other hand, so on the other hand, we find also the opposite ideas. Yes, here is the Babylonian Talmud Beitzah 25b. Israel is of all nations the most willful or headstrong one, and the Torah was to give it the right scope and power of resistance, or else the world could not have withstood its fierceness. And then we find, for example, a discussion between the followers on one hand of Maimonides, and on the other hand, the followers of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Yehuda Halevi is the author of the book of the Kuzari, the Khazars, and also Jewish theologians. He lived about 100 years before Maimonides, so it's not between them, but it's the school of that has this big debate. Maimonides believed in the intellectual ability of human beings, and therefore he believed that anyone, a Jew or a Gentile, through study, eventually can elevate themselves to a higher level of spirituality, which we call the level of prophets. So prophets are people that are elevated. Yes, Maimonides did not believe that God actually spoke to prophets, but he believed that prophets are people who were so highly elevated through their intellect and through their studies that they are in a place that they could imagine that if God had said something to them, this is what God would have said. So when Jeremiah speaks to the people, and he says, "Thus says the Lord," it's really Jeremiah thinking to himself, if God wanted to give a message to the Israelites, this would be the message, and that's what he passed to them. So to elevate yourself to the level of prophets, like the prophets of the Bible, you need to study and immerse yourself in study. And Maimonides believes that that's something that could also Gentiles also could reach that level. Yes, you don't have to be Jewish in order to be able to get there. On the other hand, Yehuda Levi believed that this trait is passed on, I will use the term again, genetically, although Yehuda Levi did not use it, yes? That is something part of the holy seed, if you want, from the quote from the book of Ezra, that only Jews can actually have the potential to raise themselves to that kind of level, but the Gentiles don't have it because they are not part of the descendants of Abraham. They are not part of the holy seed, and they cannot get there. So you see that the two different approaches, yes, is there something unique about Israel innately, genetically, or is it something that actually everybody can, that we are not different, or we are not different than others? Yes? And then you find the most extreme arrogant statement, arrogant in my opinion, statement that you can find in texts like in the Zohar or in the in the collection that is called the Al-Kuchim Oni, which was written between the 11th and 14th century in Europe. The Zohar was written sometimes 12th to 13th century to the Common Era, which says there are no human beings except for Israel. That means only Israelites, or only Jews, if you want, yes, are fully human beings. The Gentiles are not completely human beings. That is a statement that is extremely difficult to accept as it is, but it is written, and I needed to bring that quote to bring this quote to you. And what is so, or maybe to some of you like me, is very disturbing, is the fact that we find even today some rabbis and some people who actually promote this idea. Without mentioning names, we know that even some members of the Israeli cabinet and some members of the Israeli Knesset are promoting that kind of an idea of the superiority of the Jews over non-Jews. And I have to share with you a story, although it happened quite a while ago, but it reflects the same idea. When I was 17, like any other Israeli, I had to go to register for the draft, because in Israel everybody is being drafted at 18 or 18 and a half when you finish high school. And before that, you have to pass all sorts of tests and so forth, so the military can decide what to do with you. So I went to that office to register and to do some tests that they were doing, and I was waiting there, and there was another kid, 17-year-old kid who came. He came from a yeshiva. Yes, wearing black, white shirt, black hat, and so forth. And he came also to register, but he came to register in order to get to be told that he does not have he does not have to go to the military. So we talked a little bit before while we were waiting, and this kid, without any hesitations, somehow we got to the topic, to this topic, and he, without any hesitation, told me that he is superior to any Gentile. This is a 17-year-old kid, as we say in Hebrew, his mother's milk was still on his lips, and he is saying that he is superior to any Gentile just because he is Jewish. He is superior to any Gentile that in the world. I was totally shocked at the chutzpah of the arrogance of such a young man who feel that way. But that is what he was taught, and that is what in some Orthodox circles, kids that age are being taught exactly the same thing. So it is it's still quite a common opinion. Yes, and we should be aware of it. That it's not that is something that is still exists. On the other hand, you find others. Yes. For example, we have Rabbi Menachem Meiri, 13th to 14th century Talmudic commentator and philosopher. He looked at religion much more as an ethical religion, yes, and looked at Israel as maybe superior because of the religious laws that we are following, the moral religious laws, and he included Christians and Muslims in the same category by saying, yes, that he did not believe that there is a difference between Jews and non-Jews. He said there is a difference between the monotheistic religion, people who believe in the one God, and the pagans who believe in many gods. And that all that the Bible is talking, and maybe all that the Talmud isn't talking about, is the difference between the Jews as monotheistic as opposed to the pagans who believed in many gods. Yes, so he looked at it completely from a different point of view. We have during the Renaissance, the Italian Jewish philosopher Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, 1414 to 1500, addressed the question. He looked at a statement from the book of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, it says, the lover of peoples he is. Yes, God is the lover of peoples. Yes. So does that mean that God loves all the peoples, all the different nations? Yes, the Hebrew is Amim. That means nations. The lover of nations he is. Yes. So here is what Sforno says on this. Lover indeed of peoples, even though you love peoples, as it says, yes, in Exodus chapter 19, verse 5, you will be a treasure from all the nations. With this, you indicate that all of humanity is a treasure to you, as the sages said in Mishnah Avot, beloved is a man, for he was created in the image of God. Still, the holy ones are in your hands, like a bag of silver, that they are more beloved to you than the rest of their species. As he says in Exodus, and you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And the sages said also, beloved is Israel, for they are called the children of God. So Sforno denies the claim that God does not treasure other people, but he still clings to the idea that God prefers, prefers Israel to others. Later on we come, of course, to Spinoza, and Spinoza, who saw God more in nature and so forth, completely denied the possibility of the chosenness of the Israelites. He said that we have to read it in the text of the time when the text was written and the feeling that were at that time. So it was expressing that the idea of that time, but we should not read it as literally statement that applies even today. And for example, he looked at Psalms chapter 145, verse 9, where it says, the Lord is good to all, and his mercy is upon all his works. Yes, I'm not sure that if we read the whole psalm that it will reflect that idea, but that definitely, if you take these verses, it looks God is good to all, to everybody. Yes, and you can understand everybody as every human being. Okay, we are coming close to the end. So in modernity, you find that there's still a strong debate whether there is something special about the Jews or not something special about the Jews. It depends who you belong to, which camp you belong to. Some see a little bit of, yes, there is, of course, among more liberal Jews, rejection of the idea of superiority. The rejection of the idea of superiority is totally rejected, but then there needs to be some sort of a replacement. So here's an example in the statement, the statement from Emet ve'emunah, the document that describes the theology of the conservative movement for Judaism. This is a bit long. This is from Emet Ve'emunah. Few beliefs have been subject to as much misunderstanding as the chosen people doctrine. The Torah and the prophets clearly stated that this does not imply any innate Jewish superiority. In the words of Amos, "You alone have I singled out of all the families of the earth. That is why I will call you to account for your iniquities." The Torah tells us that we are to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, with obligations and duties which followed from our willingness to accept this status. Far from being a license for a special privilege, it entitles additional responsibilities not only towards God, but to our fellow human beings. For the modern traditional Jew, the doctrine of election and the covenant of Israel offers a purpose for Jewish existence which transcends its own self-interest. It suggests that because of our special history and unique heritage, we are in a position to demonstrate that the people that take seriously the idea of being covenanted with God can not only thrive in the face of oppression, but can be a source of blessing to its children and its neighbors. It obligates us to build a just and compassionate society throughout the world, and especially in the land of Israel, where we may teach by example what it means to be a covenant people, a light unto the nation. The idea of to be a light unto the nation, that is also something that is very much as the basis of the reform movement. Yes, that is what makes Jews special, with the idea that they have to make the world a better place. Okay, and here's what Reuven Hammer writes about the statement in Aleinu that we read before, that thank you, God, for making us different than them. Yes. Originally, the text read that God has not made us like the nations who bow down to nothingness and vanity and pray to an impotent God. In the Middle Ages, these words were censored since the church believed that they were insult to Christianity. Omitting them tends to give the impression that Aleinu teaches that we are both different and better than others. The actual intent is to say that we are thankful that God has enlightened us so that unlike the pagans, we worship the true God and not idols. There is no inherent superiority in being Jewish, but we do assert the superiority of monotheistic beliefs over paganism. Although paganism still exists today, we are no longer the only ones who have a belief in one God. Okay? I'm skipping Jakobowitz because it's the same kind of an idea, but I do want to read to you what Norman Lamb, who is a leader in modern Orthodox, who was a leader in modern Orthodox Judaism, and here is what he wrote. The closeness of Israel relates exclusively to its spiritual vocation embodied in the Torah. I think it's not closeness, it should be chosenness of Israel. Relates exclusively to its spiritual vocation embodied in the Torah. The doctrine it reigned was announced at Sinai. Whenever it is mentioned in our liturgy, such as the blessing immediately preceding the Shema, it is always related to Torah and mitzvot, the commandments. This spiritual vocation consists of two complementary functions described as Goy Kadosh, the holy nation, and Mamlechet Kohanim, and that is of the kingdom of priests. The first term denotes the development of communal separateness or differences in order to achieve a collective self-transcendence. The second term implies the obligation of this brotherhood of the spiritual elite towards the rest of mankind. Priesthood is defined by the prophets as fundamentally a teaching vocation. But notice the brotherhood of the spiritually elite, yes? So this is modern Orthodox. This is the idea that yes, there is something special about Jews that is elevated than the others. And then, of course, we have on the other side, we have Albert Einstein when he talked about chosenness. The word God is for me nothing more than the expression and product of human weakness. The Bible, a collection of honorable but still primitive legends, which are nevertheless pretty childish. No interpretation, no matter how subtle, can, for me, change this. For me, the Jewish religion, like all other religions, is an incarnation of the most childish superstitions. And the Jewish people to whom I gladly belong and with whose mentally I have a deep affinity have no different quality for me than all other people. I cannot see anything chosen about them. So I want to conclude with one personal comment, and then I will open it to question if there are any questions. So my personal view, and that is here I express my personal view, is that Judaism actually made a mistake when it developed the theology, when it developed in post-biblical time, that it never resolved the issue between God, the universal God, and the exclusive God of Israel. Yes, and I think that Judaism needed to expand much more into the idea into the idea that describe what does it mean for God to be universal, and what does it mean? So what are the expectations of the people who are not descendants of Abraham? Yes. Judaism is 99% biological. Yes, here and there we have some people who converted to Judaism, but most of them are people who are Jewish because the mother is Jewish. Yes, and that means that there is a decision that is made for you and not that you made yourself. By deciding that you are Jewish, yes, it was decided that you are Jewish by the fact that your mother is Jewish. Yes, and there is, I find it a little bit of an issue. Yes, there are many modern Jewish thinkers who are trying to look at God more as a universal God, and some of them say, well, God loves everybody, or God takes care of everybody, but got a special relationship with Israel as if Israel was like the firstborn. Yes, some of the prophets talk about Israel is the firstborn, and therefore there is something special about Israel and so forth. So there should be a little bit more of the idea to expand the idea to allow for more for a look at God as a universal God. But the conclusion that I cannot come to a conclusion about the topic that we were talking about, because as I demonstrated to you, there are different opinions, yes, between the idea of God, of the Jews being genetically different than the rest of the world, and therefore maybe superior, or maybe have something in which they are superior to others, and so forth. And between the idea of no, the chosenness is simply that Jews were chosen with extra obligation to try to make the world a better place, while these obligations was not something that was given to other nations. And there are all sorts of ways in between them. Yes, so I'm not coming to any kind of a final conclusion on that. And I'm going to stop at this point, and I want to thank you and to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Gideon. It was a really very interesting presentation with many texts that are are thought-provoking. And for those of you with questions, please go ahead and continue to submit them. We have a number of questions here. The questions, as you imagined, are range into the very theological and complex in many ways. So we'll see what we can do to at least have a conversation about some of them. I'll go beginning with sort of biblical texts here. Someone asked, in general, it seems to me that the passages you are highlighting are being analyzed literally. Is this immutable, or is there some other accepted way to interpret these proclamations?
Well, of course, we saw, for example, in the declaration, in the Emet Ve'emunah declaration, or in the what Reuben Hammer says and others, yes, that the text, where there is an effort to say the text definitely does not suggest that there is something special, and I'll use again the term genetically. There is nothing special about Jews and non-Jews from biological point of view, from genetical point of view, from this. And they try to move it more to the idea of if I can say it like this, yes, God chose Israel and gave them a choice to fulfill something that he does not ask from others, and that choice is to go and make the world a better place. So from that point of view, you don't have to read the text literally. I must say that, of course, I believe that yes, that it's always okay to look at the Bible and to take a text and not look at it literally, but look at what we can learn from it and how can we interpret it and so forth. At the end, but on the other hand, I believe very strongly, although I cannot prove it, that whoever wrote the text originally actually believed in the uniqueness of the Israelites. Yes, and therefore, when the Bible was written, it was written in order to understand it literally.
Thank you. Yes, that's as I sort of mentioned in my introduction, one of the areas that Mordecai Kaplan struggled with in sort of reconstructing all texts, rethinking the text, and he struggled with this one a great deal to the point where they decided to remove it from the liturgy, which is different than what the conservative movement decided to do. But he was a scholar at JTS, the conservative seminary, for most of his life, I think 60 years or more. You mentioned converts at the very end. There was a question if are there any commentary about converts and post-biblical interpretation, or?
Well, there are again two different views. Yes, one view is that converts are completely. Once somebody converted to Judaism, you are a complete Jew. Yes. Notice, of course, that conversion to Judaism is not like converting to other religions. When you convert to other religion, you don't have to negate your background. You don't have to negate your family and so forth. When somebody converts to Judaism, and I'm talking about Orthodox conversion and requirement from halachic point of view, not so much from the modern, from conservative or reform. When somebody converts to Judaism, you take yourself a new name, usually something like so-and-so, the son of Abraham and Sarah, instead of the son of whatever my parents' name was. You take yourself a different name and you actually relinquish your background. You are not anymore part of that family and that the history of your biological family, you are not part of the history of the Jewish people, and you are part of the Jewish people, and in extreme cases, in extreme interpretation, you have to completely disconnect from your family. So, for example, a convert cannot sit Shiva when his parents die, because the parents are not Jewish and they are not really his parents anymore. So conversion in Judaism is you are really converting first into the Jewish people. And once you converted to Jewish people, by essence, then the covenant applies to you. Okay, so that is a very big difference. But there are places also where people say, well, converts are almost. Yes, they are almost. Yes, yes, and therefore, the question, of course, if I believe in the superiority of what we call the holy seed, yes, if I believe in the superiority genetically of the Jews, so somebody is a convert, his genes changed, so he becomes now also like this. So it depends who you read about it.
Thank you. There's a comment here that it is, could you also comment on the fact that throughout the Torah, so many non-Jews, this person mentions Ruth, are so important in the continuation of the line of Abraham. It seems that the underlying point is that anyone can become part of the quote, holy or chosen people. Did you want to?
Well, I want to remind whoever asked the question that in the Bible, it's not matrilineal descent, it's patrilineal descent. What counts in the Bible is who is your father, not who is your mother. And therefore, it really doesn't make a difference. The purpose of the mother is to bring the children to the world. That's the purpose of the mother. So whether the mother was an Israelite or not Israelite is totally irrelevant. Yes, we don't know. Yes, we don't know. For example, Sarah, where she came from. Yes, there are some verses that Abraham claimed, but I believe that he is lying, that she is his half sister. But the text actually does not tell us in chapter 11, when we have the genealogy, it doesn't tell us who Sarah was. Yes, but that does not make any difference, because what matters is that the children, Isaac was the son of Abraham. Yes. So also at the Bible, what matters is who is the father and not who is the mother. So Ruth is a Moabite, but Boaz is an Israelite. Yes. So the children of Ruth are considered Israelite not because of Ruth, yes, but because of Boaz. There is no conversion in the Bible. That you cannot join the Israelites. If you were not born to an Israelite father, you cannot join the Israelites in the Bible. Conversion is something that was invented much later, sometimes during the Second Temple period.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions here asking about the distinguishing between the universality in Genesis, the Noahide laws, to the particularism in Exodus, if you have anything you would want to say more about.
Well, that's exactly the problem that I related to it at the very end. God makes a covenant with Noah, and the covenant that he makes with Noah is that he will never bring a flood again. That's the covenant. Then God gives instructions to Noah, and he says, these are my expectations of your behavior, you and your descendants. That's all humanity. And as I said, what is in the Bible are only two things. The fact that you can, on one hand, you can eat meat, because at the beginning, all humans and all animals were vegans, if you read Genesis chapter 1. But And the other is about murder and the need to have some sort of judicial system in order to that we human beings are supposed to take care of murderers. All the rest is rabbinic, and the rabbis tried a little bit to show that God has some expectations from other human beings about moral behavior. So they developed it into a set of seven instructions. But notice, there is no relationship associated with it. The whole idea of Judaism is that we have a relationship with God. Yes, and that is very, very important. That's why we have the services. That way, started with sacrifices, and we have the services and so forth. Yes, and we talk to God, and there is a relationship. This is not, but there is nothing that is expected from the point of view, and there is no relationship that has been established, even through the Noahide commandments, between a suggestion that there is any relationship from let's say, an Egyptian, a nice guy in Egypt who is following the moral requirements of the Noahide commandments, and he does not blaspheme the God of Israel. That does not mean that he has a relationship all of a sudden with this God. That is what is missing, the potential of, if God is a universal God and God is a God of all the people upon earth, not only of nature, but also of all the people, there should be some ability for these people to have a relationship with this God. And I find that is missing.
Thank you. Yeah, somebody noted about God in the Bible being interested in non-Jews as far as Jonah's warning to Nineveh and Sodom and Gomorrah as some potential examples. If you wanted to say anything about that, or you can move on.
Well, to take, as I mentioned before, yes, you have to look at the whole Bible in order to say this is the opinion of the Bible. So there is a story of Jonah, there is a story of Job. Job is not, there's nothing that says that Job was Jewish or an Israelite or anything like this, for example. Yes. So the same about Jonah. Should we consider the book of Jonah as history, or should we consider the book of Jonah as a story that is wanting to tell us something? Yes, and many interpreters look at the book of Jonah not as a history, as a possible that something like this actually happened, but as a story that is trying to tell us about the struggle between 2 points of view. Yes, Jonah is representing the idea that God should be much more strict. Yes, God says that he will punish, then he should punish. Yes, like parents should be consistent. Yes, and God is appearing as the God of mercy. Yes, that people change, and God is willing to accept it and to be merciful. And that is the contrast in the book of Jonah. Whether the book of Jonah really represent a historical event, there is no indication that something like this ever happened, and so forth. So I would look at the book of Jonah more as a story about what do we learn from this story, and that's why is it in the Bible, than to look at it as representing history. Yes, the same about the book of Esther, the same about the book of Job, and some other books in the Bible.
Thank you. Yes, and here's one of the sort of more theologically difficult questions that anyone's really that exists in Judaism or the world in general. But would and you can give your opinion. Would you explain the Holocaust and the anti-Semitism and anti-Israel worldwide situation in the same interpretation as the slavery in Egypt? If that is so, is this the destiny of the Jewish people? Someone else similarly asked, why have there been so many almost successful attempts at our elimination if we
Yes.
are special and chosen?
Yes. So let me say two things. Number one, there is no question in my mind that in some way the sense of Judaism to be separate and to be different, and to be the chosen people, led in some cases to increase anti-Semitism. Yes, people don't like people who think that they are superior to others and so forth. That does not, in no way, shape, or form, it justifies anti-Semitism, and it does not explain all sorts of anti-Semitism. The question about the Jews suffering throughout history, for a very long time, Jews continued to believe that God is participating in history, and therefore, when bad things happened to Jews, it must be a result of a consequence for their behavior. So, for example, you find during the Crusades, when the Crusades got organized in the Rhine Valley before they went to save the Holy Land from the Muslims, they had nothing else to do, so they started to kill the Jews in the area. Yes, and so we had some serious pogroms at that time, and you find survivors who documented what happened, and you find that the first line in the document says, "Because of our sins, this happened to us," and then comes the description of what happened. So the Jewish theology for hundreds of years was that God is participating in history and God is in control of the fate of the Jewish people. And therefore, when bad things happen to Jewish people, that means God allowed it or God did it because of things that we did. Okay? In modernity, yes, or once the Holocaust came, it became a question. That is too much. Yes, that it doesn't work anymore. That kind of horrific things that happened during the Holocaust simply cannot. It doesn't work anymore. So you have millions of articles and opinions about where was God in Auschwitz, and of course, modern theologians accept also now the idea that God is not participating in history. God is not moving things. God created the world and God created nature, and then there is a lot of randomity in life, and there are also historical reasons why things happen, but it's not that God is moving things all the time around. And therefore, yes, comes the question, people changed now the question, not where was God during the Holocaust, but where were human beings in the Holocaust? Yes, how could so many human beings change and behave in such a way? That is becoming the question. So, taking that approach, that now I don't believe anymore that God is actually active in history, then what does it mean now that God is that we are the chosen people? That becomes now a different kind of a question, and that different people give different answers to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that answer. So I imagine our audience does too. It's definitely a difficult one to tackle in the history of Judaism. There's a question here that several people have asked, and it's more of a clarification question, but asking about when and how being Jewish changed from patrilineal descent from the father to matrilineal descent, the mother. So if you could just say a little more about that to clarify.
Yes. It happened. I don't remember exactly the time, but I think it's something like the 1st century BCE, about that time. There is one place, and I forgot. I think it's in the book of Divrei Yamim. How do you say it in English? I forgot now how to say it in English. The last book of the Bible. Yes, I think that there is a story about a, a case where an Egyptian man had a Jewish wife, and their son somehow was considered Jewish. And somehow this particular story allowed the rabbis to make the decision. I mean, the rabbis realized, of course, that that in most of the time we know who the mother is, but we don't always know who is the father. So the whole question of who is a Jew, if we go by patrilineal descent, makes it very complicated to decide if somebody is Jewish or not Jewish. And they use this particular verses from the Bible to change it to matrilineal descent. Yes, and of course, we had already at that time, we had a lot of cases of rape and so forth by different conquerors of the area. So that allowed them to change it into a matrilineal descent, where it is much easier to decide then whether a person is Jewish or not Jewish.
Thank you. We are coming to the end of our time together. I wondered, as sort of a final question, what are there lessons that you feel like we can, as your final thoughts, lessons that we can take for our current situation in the world today based on these texts and all the way through modern commentaries?
Well, without getting too much into politics and without getting too much into the current situation, I would say that my personal preference, of course, is to look at the idea of the chosenness as the idea of a mission and not of any kind of genetic or anything like this, any kind of superiority or anything like this. And to look at the idea that our mission in the world should be to be a light unto the nations, and that we should behave in a way that will be a light unto the nations. And an example, and be an example to the rest of the world that will actually become a role model for the rest of the world to behave. Without getting into any of the details, and I'm glad that I'm running out of time, I must say that unfortunately, I don't see that we are fulfilling that mission. Yes, and I'm very, very disturbed by the fact that, for example, and then again, this is my personal opinion, and I'm glad that I'm running out of time, so I don't have to answer more questions about that. I don't believe that the state of Israel is behaving in the way that it should behave to be that kind of an example to the world. But that's our mission, to be the light unto the nations.
Thank you. I think that's an important point to end on, how we can can radiate for the rest of the world, or however you want to define it. So thank you once again for sharing your expertise with us and your wisdom and tackling all these very insightful questions from our audience. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah. And thank you all out there for being part of this engaging session. Remember to stay connected and visit our website, habermaninstitute.org, for all of our upcoming learning opportunities. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.